That she had taken the trouble to be born was not enough to guarantee Elizabeth, daughter of King Henry VIII, the resplendent existence of an English princess. True, her birth on Sunday, 7 September 1533, was greeted with bonfires, interminable peals of bells, and a solemn Te Deum in St. Paul's Cathedral. Less than 3 years later, however, her mother, Anne Boleyn, was beheaded on the grounds of adultery, and the little princess forfeited her rank. Drama was the hallmark of life with Henry VIII, the king who had 6 wives, of whom 2 were beheaded, 2 divorced, 1 died in childbirth, and only the last prevailed. His 3 children had 3 different mothers. The eldest, Mary, was the fruit of his first marriage to Catherine of Aragon. Elizabeth was the daughter of his second wife, and his third wife, Jane Seymour, gave birth to his youngest child and only son, Edward VI. Elizabeth was 17 years younger than Mary and 4 years older than her brother. If we are to gain an understanding of her childhood, adolescence, and reign, we must go back in time and recall the volcanic family from which she sprang. Elizabeth was a Tudor, a member of a family that had come to power thanks to the drive and initiative of her grandfather, Henry VII, and to the fact that the laws of succession prevailing in 15th century England were not too well defined or restrictive. Primogeniture, so firmly embedded in the royal traditions of France, was not recognized as a sufficient and necessary entitlement to the throne of England. Hence the long power struggle waged by the descendants of Edward III. Royal authority was weakened by this civil war known as the Wars of the Roses. The Lancastrians, the line that produced Henry IV, Henry V, and Henry VI, took a red rose as their emblem, whereas a white rose symbolized the Yorkist branch of Edward IV and Richard III. Whoever wore the crown had to resist the unremitting pressure exerted on him in turn by the great rival houses of Lancaster, York, and Warwick, which maintained veritable private armies. On 22nd August 1485, when Richard III was killed by Henry Tudor during the last battle of the Wars of the Roses, Henry, the last of the Lancastrian line, seized his opportunity without hesitation. Lord Stanley, who had facilitated his victory by deserting the king's party, retrieved the crown from the dust of the battlefield and placed it on his head to resounding cries of "Long live King Henry." The new king set off for London, determined to assert his rights, somewhat dubious rights, as he himself was only too aware. He based his claim to the throne on the lineage of his mother, Margaret Beaufort. Margaret was the sole descendant of the Beauforts and a great-granddaughter of John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, the 4th son of Edward III. During the oppressive reign of Richard III, fearing the life of her son, the posthumous son of Edmund Tudor, Margaret sent him to Brittany, where he persistently plotted to reinstate the House of Lancaster. Having succeeded at the second attempt, he asserted his authority in the simplest manner. He proclaimed himself King Henry VII, summoned Parliament in November 1485, and, without entering into the details of his succession, argued that his victory had manifested the will of God. Henry's decisiveness, coupled with general lassitude and the fact that Richard III, the last sovereign of the Yorkist line, had not only left no descendant, but contrived the murder of his nephews, the sons of Edward IV, clinched matters in his favor. It was only then that he married Elizabeth of York, thereby ending the rivalry between the two clans once and for all. The young dynasty's position was consolidated by the birth of 2 sons and 2 daughters. Arthur, the eldest, married Catherine of Aragon in 1501, but died 5 months later, having already been languid and sickly at the time of the ceremony, and it appears that the adolescent couple's marriage was never consummated. However, the Spanish connection, accompanied by a favorable dowry, was too valuable to be lightly abandoned. Ever practical, Henry VII solved the problem by marrying his second son, Henry, who was now Prince of Wales, to the youthful widow. His two daughters also made brilliant marriages. Margaret wed James IV of Scotland. Their granddaughter was Mary Stuart, and the younger Mary became the wife of Louis XII of France. The latter died not long after, and his queen, who had not borne him any children, returned to England, where she married the Duke of Suffolk. Their descendants were exclusively female, and we shall later have occasion to speak of their granddaughters, Jane and Catherine Grey. In 1509, however, when Henry VII died and Henry VIII came to the throne, questions of succession were secondary. The young king was 18 years old, robust, handsome, and adept at all forms of physical exercise. He was also fond of music, dancing, and poetry. Heir to a country eager to put an end to internal strife, and married to a loving wife who lavished affection on him, he seemed destined for a glorious reign. The young couple and their entourage were not unduly worried by the ensuing series of miscarriages and stillbirths, especially as Catherine was delivered of a healthy daughter, Mary, in 1516. Although a trifle disappointed at not having had a son, the king felt sure that a boy would not be long in coming, and displayed little ill humor. Daughters made good marriages, after all, and the little princess soon amused him with her quick wit. And so, since he continued to enjoy his conjugal duties, he persevered. The years went by, however, and still no male heir appeared. The 6-year age gap between Henry and Catherine abruptly widened. In 1525, the queen turned 40, whereas the king, at 34, had never been more flamboyant or more pragmatic. It was obvious that Catherine would bear him no more children, so the necessary conclusions had to be drawn. Whispers began to circulate at court. The word annulment went the rounds. There were plenty of dynastic justifications for divorce. Memories of the War of the Roses were still vivid enough for everyone to want a clear-cut line of succession to the throne, and this problem was doubly acute because the Tudor family lacked male heirs. Although it was thoroughly accepted in England, as witnessed the Tudors' example, that regal power could be transmitted by the female line, people were chary of being ruled by a woman. Would a queen regent be able to exert the requisite authority in an age when the sovereign still commanded his troops in battle?